You're listening to the Motivated Mindset Podcast with Bobby Stein.
Hey guys, thanks for joining the Motivated Mindset Podcast. It's a glorious day, once again, thankfully, really appreciating it. And I wanted to ask you all a question. Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Do you believe that thoughts are things? Do you believe that we become what we think about? Well, you may not subscribe to that theory or that notion, but stick with me for a little bit, and I just want to share some thoughts, because thoughts are things, right? So back in 1956, there was a gentleman by the name of Earl Nightingale, and he was a radio actor. And he had a show on the radio networks called Sky King. It was about the flying cowboy, and they would paint word pictures, and it was like a radio serial, kind of like a soap opera or adventure action show, but done over the radio airwaves. And he also owned an insurance company, and he was going away on a trip, and he wanted to craft a memo, something to leave, words of encouragement and instruction for his sales team in his absence. So he had been a student and studying the writings of Napoleon Hill, who authored the book Think and Grow Rich. And in that book, Hill proclaims that thoughts are things. Well, Earl Nightingale had like this epiphany, and he thought, you know what? We become what we think about. So he crafts this memo, and shortly thereafter records it in long form on an album, like vinyl, so that people could play it on the record players, and he hands it out to his sales force. And within the organization, the album spreads and gains a little bit of notoriety. Well, fast forward, he publishes this record, and he calls it The Strangest Secret, and its premise is based on we become what we think about. So giving that a thought, if we become what we think about, wouldn't it behoove us to think righteous thoughts, good thoughts, pleasant thoughts, rather than negative ones, if that's who we become? You see, we are the sum total of our thoughts and decisions, behaviors and actions up until this moment in time. We could be no less, no different. So if we want to create a new version of ourselves, if we're sick and tired, and we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, doesn't it behoove us to think pleasant thoughts? I think of it this way, and I agree, and I subscribe to the notion, by the way, whether it's placebo in effect and really doesn't have any scientific backing, which I think it does. I'm going to run with a placebo. I'm going to run with the fact that I become what I think about, and I want to think about I am healthy, I enjoy good relationships, I have good communication skills, I have a wonderful career, a thriving profession, and I want to continue in that train of thought, and let that kind of come to me. I look at thoughts like this. It's been equated many times, as I'm sure you've heard, that the mind is like a garden. And a garden, if left unattended, will get weeds in it, right? So it's got to be maintained. It's got to be cultivated, the garden. It has to be weeded out, and so that the plants can flourish, so that the good can overcome the bad. And our mind is much like that. I always like to think of it as a thought being a seed, being sown into a garden, but it's being sown into the garden of our mind. The seed goes into the physical soil, and it becomes invisible. It goes dark, right? It's underneath the ground, and you don't hear from it because it's doing its thing. When all of a sudden, weeks later, days later, a season later, the seed is produced and comes forth as an outright manifestation producing fruit. Well, that's the same with our thought life. When I plan a thought, or I entertain a thought, consider a thought, a feeling, an emotion, and I let that sucker brew, it doesn't recede into the past and fall back into the invisible. It kind of goes out in front of me like the plant does, follows the seed. The experience follows the thought. That's been my experience. So I would encourage you to plant good seeds. You know, Henry Ford said that if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And then Shakespeare in Hamlet says, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Meaning, it's all about perspective. It's how we think and how we view things. We become what we think about most of the time. In the Bible, it says, as a man thinketh in his heart, his mind, so is he. So if I have the desire to be more than sick and tired, and I want to be healthy and prosperous, it behooves me to think thoughts along those lines. And if I think of a good, the other thing about thoughts is that for me, I suck at it sometimes, man. I mean, I automatically go down rabbit holes. If I am, thinking about a bad situation, or whatever I think about, the experience kind of comes after me. Like what I focus on expands. And I have to really pay attention to that. I have to be the gatekeeper of my mind. I've got to know at any given time. If I'm feeling bad, I need to take pause and say, why am I feeling bad? What is my thoughts doing? I have to rein it all back in and focus it in and be the gatekeeper of my mind in terms of what thoughts I allow to enter in, thus subscribing to the fact that we become what we think about. And what we focus on expands. I mean, what we think about, what we feel, it truly does expand. And it's almost miraculous. You can picture it this way. Doesn't anybody use turn signals anymore? Are turn signals an option? See, that's a bad thought. Now I can go down the rabbit hole with that. And I'm going to notice that nobody's using their turn signal. I do think it's an option. I think it's illegal to use turn signals sometimes in the state of Florida. But seriously, we focus, we get things expand in our mind, in our consciousness, in our experience when we focus on them, when we think about them. So I've got to be that good gatekeeper, that good steward of my mind, and play the role of you're not getting in. And I would encourage you just to run with that for a minute, give it a try. Again, if you don't subscribe to it, treat it like it's, an experiment. Give it 21 days. Foster a habit. You never know. You'll start to become more mindful of your moods and then your subsequent actions and reactions. So that's the word for the day. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, quit it. Or at least give it a try. You might find some benefit in it. So this episode has been brought to you by our friends at Von Barron Motorcycle. www.vonbarronmotorcycles.com. Give them a visit. Great folks, great offerings. You'll be glad you did. We appreciate their support. Thanks so much, Von Barron, for sponsoring the episode. And like I said, I hope this has encouraged you. If it did and you like it, like it. And until next time, as always, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and please take good care.